I'm Richard, and Apple just launched the latest MacBooks just hours ago, and it's available for purchase next week. The MacBook 14 and the MacBook 16. Now, the biggest difference, of course, is the internals, not the external, because the 14 and 16, other than the size of the LCD and the size of the laptop, there is pretty much not much difference in them. The battery life is a little bit different, but the insights are the most important ones. So let's focus on the insights and also explain why the new MacBooks are a little bit pricey, starting off at $1,999 and going up to a few $1,000s more, which, if you ask me, is expected out of Apple. But the most important part is that the $199 version isn't that worth it because it is the 8-core version. So you probably want to get the 10-core version, which is $2,400. And there is a reason why it's so expensive. I'll explain in this video here. Especially if you are a content creator, because Apple try to market it in such a way that maximizes their numbers. And I will just put it in relation to the M1 Max for a better clarity itself. Now, firstly, both the M1 Pro and M1 Max are still called M1 chips because I'm guessing is that they are using the same generation of chipset, just that the density is a bit different. More cores, more GPUs and stuff. So you can probably scale the performance of the M1 chip. Firstly, the M1 Pro comes in 8-core and 10-core version for CPU, while the M1 Max only comes in 10-core for CPU. The M1 Pro comes in 16 GPUs, the M1 Max comes with 32 GPUs. The M1 Pro comes up to 32 GB of RAM, which comes at a base configuration of 16 GB of RAM, while the M1 Max goes up to 64 GB of RAM. And in terms of bandwidth, the M1 Pro has 200 GB per second, the M1 Max has 400 GB per second, but if you ask me, that doesn't matter too much unless you are doing certain applications, which I'm not sure myself what is it that makes a difference in such a case. So let's see. Firstly, the CPU. Now, the old one has 8 cores and the new one has 10 cores. So you'll be wondering, is it just a 20% improve of performance? Not really. Because the old M1s come with 4 efficiency cores and 4 high performance cores. You can think of it as efficiency cores are things for your day-to-day web surfing, while the performance cores are really high-powered cores meant to process videos and photos, that kind of stuff. So the new M1 Pro and Max comes in a 2-8 configuration, 2 efficiency and 8 high performance cores, which means yes, double the amount of high performance core while half the amount of efficiency cores, which probably translates to about 60%, 50 to 60% improvement compared to the old M1s themselves, if you look at totality of performance. So I would say as the new MacBooks definitely perform better than the old M1, just based on numbers like this. 50% is still a very good number if you ask me. Now, in terms of GPU, it's even more straightforward because this guy only has 8 GPUs. The new one has up to 16 and 32 GPUs. And GPUs are, I would say, as not exactly linear, but not too far from being linear themselves. So a 16 GPU is probably at least like 1.7, 1.8 times more powerful than the old M1 chip, while the 32 GPU you can say is like 3 to 3.5 times more powerful than the old M1 chip themselves. So if you take M1 as the benchmark, the new laptops are still significantly better, easily 1.6, 1.7 times better if you look at totality of performance. Now, the other thing that actually matters a lot, of course, other than the improvement of RAM, is also the improvement of the SSDs. The SSDs is very important if you're editing videos, especially if you're editing multiple streams of video and doing read and write simultaneously. The new one with up to twice the speed of the old M1 Max, or compared to any other MacBooks out there, will make a difference when you're doing 8K video, read and write simultaneously on your MacBook itself. That's something to note. If you're just doing one stream, it probably doesn't matter. If you're doing 3, 4, 5 streams, you probably can see a difference significantly. And then the most important thing, why is the MacBook so expensive, is because of the screen. That's what I'm guessing. Because it has the XDR display, and the way they write it is probably the same technology used in their 30-inch version. Now, what is so special about the XDR display? Firstly, it is very bright. It can be brighter than your iPhone itself, which is a thing because there is no other screens out there that can reach 1000 nits on a laptop. So this is the first laptop that reached that high, at least from what I know. And then the next thing, it has a very high contrast ratio, 1,000,000:1. Now, traditionally, only OLED screens have such high contrast ratios. Normal laptops are in like the 1000 range or the 2,000 or 3,000 range at most. In fact, most laptops are like 500-600 contrast ratios. Absolute contrast ratios. So I'm assuming why the contrast ratio is so high, because they're using some LED technology that they can shut themselves off to make true black and then on it to get true white. So they are acting kind of like an OLED but using LED lights themselves. So the new screens are very similar to what you see on the 30-inch display that does the exact same technology. And lastly, it has 1 billion colors, so it's probably a true 10-bit display, and it is going to be very color accurate because traditionally MacBook screens are quite high performance when it comes to color themselves. And if you look at it, you look out in the market itself, if you try to buy a HDR display out there, I'll tell you that there is no HDR display that is below $1,000, at least from what I know, at a 40-inch size. If you go below that, there's probably none either. At least I do not know of any 10-bit HDR, or should I say 10-bit true HDR display out there that is as good as what you find in a MacBook that costs below $1,000 out there. So that is pretty much where all the money goes to, the screen, the very good screen. Now you may be asking, what's the equivalent in Windows laptop? And that is the OLED displays. OLED displays have the same contrast ratio, the same color power, but they do not have the same brightness. Most OLED displays are like 600 nits themselves. So I can almost say that the new M1 screens are probably some of the best screens on the laptops, at least according to specs. We have to see the real review to know more. And one of the major improvement, if you are a MacBook user, you may want to get a new Mac because of this major improvement, or should I say major backward stepping. Now the new MacBook went from dongle hell to not needing most dongles at all. Because the new Macs now only have 3 Thunderbolt ports rather than 4. However, they include a HDMI port, so finally you can do presentation without bringing a dongle out. And next, it comes with an SD card slot, which means you can now read most of the SD cards from cameras and video cameras without actually needing a dongle. Good stuff. And lastly, it has a MagSafe port, means you can charge your laptop externally with a charger. And this charger, if somebody was to accidentally kick the cable, isn't going to rip your port out or spoil your port. The cable will just dislodge like a magnetic connection, which is one of the best things in the old MacBook. I do not know why they went for full-blown USB-C, but the Mac charger port is fantastic. So that's pretty much the breakdown of the new MacBook. And if you ask me, if you scale it off, the old M1 is at least going to be 50% or if not twice the power of the old M1 themselves. And with a significantly better screen, way faster SSD, more RAM, I think it kind of justifies why it costs more than 2 times the price, at least for the version that I will recommend, which is the 2.4K version, 2 times the price of the old MacBook Air here. And that's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think that the new M1 Macs are turning out to be really nice workstations, assuming that they scale properly and benchmarks does show that improvement. I think the new M1 Macs are truly something worthy to purchase, especially the 14-inch version, because in the market today there is no 14-inch laptop that can perform like the M1 Mac. By the way, I didn't say it, but based on research, the M1 Mac's GPU power is like a 3080, and you know how powerful a 3080 is? Pretty much you can go online and search how powerful is a 3080 mobile graphics card, and the new M1 Mac with their M1 Max chip, with only consuming 100 watt of power, including the CPU, will perform at that level. That's something unheard of because a normal Intel laptop will probably need 200 over watts of power. That's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next time. Bye bye.